people like this, they don't think that there's going to be any harm to them by taking this moralistic stance, because authentic casting won't be implemented anywhere. All right, hello everybody. Time to talk about ProZD, or Seung-Hwan Cho is his actual name. And he's recently, I guess, taken leave of Twitter because he was getting a little bit too much backlash from one of his recent actions. But the problem is that most people are just calling him a hypocrite, which, I mean, is fine if you're talking to someone who believes that hypocrisy is a bad thing. The best take I've seen so far was by Eric July. He's almost always worth listening to. I'll put a link in the description for you if you'd like to take a look at his video. And what Eric July grabbed onto, was that it's not just hypocrisy, it's that ProZD doesn't mind being a hypocrite because his whole ideology is hypocritical at its base. Let's dig a little deeper. What I'm talking about is this kind of victimhood mentality, or this victimhood ideology. It's inherently hypocritical because it posits that I am a victim because of something X that doesn't actually necessarily prove you're a victim. It's some kind of collectivist notion that I have, a background X, or I have background Y, and therefore, because people of background X are not the majority in some particular area, I am therefore a victim, and therefore there's a different set of rules for me anyway, right? That's the hypocrisy at the base of this ideology. The idea that different rules apply to me because I'm a victim. So, ProZD has done this support for authentic casting. And, I don't know how far gone he actually is. There's going to be some mixture of, honest desire to do good in his own mind, but there's going to be, it seems like there's probably some, or at least some people who do the same things as he does, are doing these things for performative or cynical reason. The idea for them is that, well, the system that we have in which people can hire whomever they want, ostensibly, is broken, and it is stacked against me. And so what I can do is I can look better to the people who do the hiring by taking some kind of moralistic stance, right? So the idea is that what you do is you try to look moral to the hiring people, and HR is often more likely to be infiltrated by people with victimhood mentality or victimhood ideology earlier than other parts of the company. And of course, people like this, they don't think that there's going to be any harm to them by taking this moralistic stance, because authentic casting won't be implemented anywhere. Now, this ideology, it's often said by the people who believe in it that it stems from systemic failures of voluntary association, which they usually deride as capitalism. Basically, the idea is that X or Y race or ethnicity doesn't get a fair shake, right? In reality, this is not only cynical and self-serving, it's actually wrong. And what happened to ProZD is proof that he's wrong. Companies did actually adopt authentic casting without guns being pointed at them by the government. There's no law that forced them to do so. So voluntary association, in fact, did give them enough power to change the industry. Well, how about that? It doesn't actually seem to be a real systemic problem that this is something that can never be changed, that the individual is hopelessly, outnumbered and outgunned in enforcing this kind of, moralistic stance. Basically, these systemic failings are not actually systemic. Of course, these people still want preferential treatment. They still want to have all the preferences of being the victim while not actually being a victim. It goes to show how wrong and how empty their ideology is, because what they basically do is they virtue signal for jobs. They end up virtue signaling so well that companies actually do what they're suggesting. They adopt, at least some of them, adopt authentic casting, and then they can't get the jobs because, because they basically talked themselves out of a job by making this moralistic stance. I mean, it's funny because these people have made their case well enough that the thing that they claimed would never happen, or that they assumed would never happen, actually did. And so now they end up having to kind of, live by their own ideology when it turns against them. That's one element of it, that there's actually some performativeness and there's some cynicism, or at least they think there's performativeness, right? Taking a stand that I'm in favor of authentic casting is a great moral stance to have to impress the pink-haired HR ladies, but when it's actually, implemented, it can be a problem. Well, why? Well, let's go into this one other little detail. There is already significant government pressure to hire diverse people, right? Or whatever diverse means in the common parlance. There's no similar government pressure to force there to be diverse casts, right? There's social pressure, but that social pressure exists for both of these in roughly equivalent strength. Probably even more so a little bit for the diversity of actual hiring, because fiction is fiction, despite how much these people often pretend that it isn't. So here's what actually happened: the number of diverse voice actors grew faster than the number of diverse characters, or in these highly funded works of fiction. They literally argued themselves into higher unemployment by basically putting a force that increases their numbers greatly for actual hiring, but doesn't actually put the force forward for increasing the numbers of characters that they could voice under this authentic casting policy. It's actually kind of funny when you think about it. I don't know. Eric July did a good job of pointing out that hypocrisy doesn't matter to people like this often because they believe in a hypocritical ideology. They don't actually care about being hypocrites because they already believe in a two-tier justice system. I hope that I was able to add a little bit more by pointing out the performativeness, the fact that they can change things that they claim are, systemic and permanent, and then the fact that they are able to kind of argue themselves argue themselves into a lower percentage, ratio between voice actors and characters. So there we go. By the way, if anyone is hiring voice actors based on diversity of thought, which nobody ever hires or thinks about, let me know. There aren't enough voluntarists or anarchists in the industry. Ha ha ha. Anyway, that was my thought on this thing. Again, Eric July's video will be in the description. It's the best one I've seen so far on this topic because he doesn't just call them a hypocrite and let it go. He actually points out that their ideology doesn't care about them being hypocrites. But I hope I was able to add a little bit more to it. I'll have my notes basically written in the blog post version. There'll be a link to that and all that good stuff. Anyway, if you like what I'm doing, if you want to support the channel, you know what to do. And I will see you next time. Have a good rest of your week.